There's a certain type of person who says, "I'm sorry," the way others say, "hello." They apologize for taking up space, for speaking, for existing too loudly in a room. They say sorry when someone bumps into them, sorry for asking a question, sorry for being right when someone else was wrong. If you've ever caught yourself apologizing for things that weren't your fault, for simply being human, you're not alone. And there's a profound psychology behind why some people carry sorry like a shield, protecting themselves from a world that once made them feel like they were too much, or not enough, or somehow always in the way. See, excessive apologizing isn't really about manners. It's not about being polite or considerate. It's something deeper. It's about safety. It's about making yourself smaller so that others feel bigger. It's about a quiet belief, buried so deep you might not even know it's there, that your presence requires permission, that your thoughts need justification, that your existence, somehow, is an inconvenience. And here's what most people don't realize. The ones who apologize constantly aren't weak. They're hyper-aware. They've learned to read rooms like others read books. They can sense tension before it forms, feel judgment before it's spoken. They apologize not because they've done something wrong, but because they're trying to smooth over a discomfort they can feel in the air like static before a storm. Psychologists call this hyper-responsibility. It's when you've internalized the belief that you're responsible for other people's emotions, for keeping the peace, for making sure everyone else is comfortable, even if it costs you your own sense of self. And it usually starts early. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were unpredictable, where love felt conditional, where you learned that the best way to stay safe was to stay small, to apologize before anyone could be upset, to take the blame before it could land on someone more fragile. So you learned. You learned that "I'm sorry" was a magic phrase that could diffuse anger, prevent conflict, keep you safe. And it worked. For a while, it worked. But somewhere along the way, that survival strategy became a prison. Because now you apologize even when there's no threat. You say sorry to your coffee cup when you knock it over. Sorry to the sidewalk when you trip. Sorry to people who hurt you, as if their cruelty was somehow your fault for being in its path. It's like carrying an invisible weight that no one else can see. You move through the world braced for impact, ready to take responsibility for collisions that haven't even happened yet. And the exhausting part? Most people don't even notice. They accept your apologies without question, without realizing that each one costs you a small piece of yourself. But here's something fascinating. Research in social psychology shows that people who over-apologize often score high on traits like empathy, conscientiousness, and emotional sensitivity. They're not apologizing because they're insecure, though that's what it looks like from the outside. They're apologizing because they care deeply about how their presence affects others, because they've developed an almost supernatural ability to detect discomfort, and their immediate instinct is to fix it, even if they didn't cause it. There's a term for this: emotional labor. It's the invisible work of managing other people's feelings, of smoothing over tensions, of making sure everyone else is okay, even when you're not. And people who constantly apologize are often doing this labor without even realizing it. They're the ones who sense when someone's mood shifts and immediately think, "What did I do?" They're the ones who replay conversations in their minds, wondering if they said something wrong, if they took up too much space, if they were too much. And that phrase, "too much," it haunts people who over-apologize. Too loud, too emotional, too needy, too present. They've learned to apologize for their very existence because somewhere, somehow, they got the message that who they are in their natural state requires an explanation, a justification, an apology. But here's the paradox. The same sensitivity that makes you apologize excessively is also what makes you incredibly attuned to others. You notice when someone's struggling. You remember small details. You can hold space for people's pain in ways that others can't. Your empathy isn't a flaw, it's a gift. It's just that somewhere along the way, you learn to weaponize it against yourself. See, when you apologize for everything, you're not just being polite. You're making a quiet statement about your worth. You're saying, my needs are negotiable. My boundaries are optional. My presence is a burden unless I can justify it. And the cruel thing is, the more you apologize, the more you reinforce that belief. It becomes a loop. You apologize because you feel small, and feeling small makes you apologize more. There's something else happening too. Over-apologizing can actually be a form of control. I know that sounds strange, but stay with me. When you apologize first, you control the narrative. You beat others to the punch. If you're already taking the blame, no one else can hurt you with it. It's preemptive damage control. You're managing the pain before it can catch you off guard. And in a weird way, that feels safer than being vulnerable, than standing in your truth and risking rejection. But it comes at a cost, because when you apologize for things that aren't your fault, you start to lose track of what actually is. Your sense of responsibility becomes distorted. You become the person who says sorry when someone steps on your foot, the person who apologizes for having an opinion that differs from someone else's, the person who shrinks themselves so small that they become a shadow of who they actually are. And maybe you've noticed this. People start to take your apologies for granted. They stop questioning whether you actually did something wrong because you're so quick to claim fault. Your sorry loses its meaning. It becomes background noise. And ironically, the very thing you're doing to be considerate, to be liked, to be accepted, it can actually make people respect you less. Not because you're apologizing, but because you're teaching them that your boundaries don't matter, that your feelings are optional, that you'll always be the one to bend. Psychologists talk about something called learned helplessness. It's when you've been in situations where you had no control so many times that you stop trying to assert yourself even when you could. And for chronic apologizers, there's a similar pattern. You've learned that taking the blame is easier than standing your ground. That saying sorry is safer than saying, actually, that wasn't okay. So even when you're right, even when someone else is clearly in the wrong, you apologize because it's familiar, because it's what you know, because conflict feels more dangerous than self-erasure. But here's what I want you to understand. Your tendency to apologize, it didn't come from nowhere. It's not a character flaw. It's an adaptation. It's a response to an environment that made you feel like you needed to earn your place, to justify your existence, to constantly prove that you deserve to take up space. And that's not your fault. You learned to apologize because at some point, it kept you safe. It kept the peace. It kept you from being too much for someone who couldn't handle your wholeness. Still, there's a difference between being considerate and being self-erasing, between taking responsibility for your actions and taking responsibility for everyone else's emotions. And learning that difference, it's not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about recognizing that you deserve to exist without apology, that your thoughts are valid, that your needs matter, that your presence, exactly as you are, is not something that requires constant justification. There's this beautiful thing that happens when chronic apologizers start to recognize their pattern. They begin to notice how often they say sorry, and at first, it's shocking. They catch themselves apologizing for apologizing. But awareness, it's the first step. Because once you see it, once you understand where it comes from, you can start to untangle it. You can start asking, do I actually need to apologize for this? Or am I just trying to make myself smaller? And slowly, things shift. You start replacing I'm sorry with thank you. Instead of sorry I'm late, it becomes thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry for bothering you, it's thank you for your time. That small linguistic shift, it changes everything, because it moves you from a position of apology to a position of gratitude, from deficit to exchange, from burden to equal. You start learning that setting boundaries isn't cruel, that saying no without an apology attached doesn't make you selfish, that standing in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable for others, is not something you need to justify. And yes, it feels terrifying at first, because you've spent so long managing everyone else's comfort that prioritizing your own feels almost rebellious. But here's what's on the other side of that fear: freedom. The freedom to be fully yourself without constantly monitoring how much space you're taking up. The freedom to have opinions without immediately softening them with apologies. The freedom to make mistakes and take responsibility for them without taking responsibility for everyone else's reactions to them. And maybe the most profound shift is this: you start to realize that the people who truly care about you, they never needed you to be small. They never needed your constant apologies. They don't love you despite your presence. They love you because of it. The real ones, they want you to take up space. They want to hear your thoughts. They celebrate your existence, not tolerate it. So if you're someone who apologizes even when you're right, even when you've done nothing wrong, even when you're just existing in the way humans are meant to exist, I need you to hear this. You are not too much. You are not in the way. Your presence does not require an apology. Your thoughts do not need a disclaimer. Your feelings are not an inconvenience. The world convinced you that you needed to shrink to fit. But the truth is, you were never too big. The spaces you were in were just too small for your wholeness. And maybe it's time to stop apologizing for outgrowing them. Maybe it's time to stand in your full size and let the world adjust, because you were never meant to be small. You were meant to be you, completely, unapologetically, beautifully you. And that doesn't need an apology. It needs celebration.